I got to ask you this because Wall Street in the 1980s conjures up images of Stratton Oakmont from Wolf of Wall Street and all that. I mean, was it that crazy then, or?
That would get me started on something we can spend 8 hours on.
Yeah. How does a kid from the Bronx, which I'm assuming at that time was a bit of the wrong side of the tracks, how does that guy end up on Wall Street?
Very long story, and I'll put it in a very condensed method. I would meet my wife, who was born and raised in Ireland. We'd get married in Ireland. My wife was from that last generation, which is traditional. Father gave us a little, what they call diary, of summer money, certainly nothing that was going to live off of, but I took a job as a warehouse manager. Loved it, loved driving the forklift. Still to this day, I think if I can just go back for one day and do it. And our security guy would be very involved in the stock market, and I started to learn from him. Took 7,000 of the 25,000 that my father-in-law gave me, and I started trading stock options. And in less than 9 months, it was worth $100,000, which was huge, huge money at that point in time. I got so intrigued that I started an investors club. Just like guys get together and talk about sports, we got together to talk about the markets. And some man showed up that had a small brokerage firm. And by the time I was done at that night, he says, "You're in the wrong business." And despite everything my wife and father-in-law had against it, in 1983, I took the test to become a stockbroker, which that's what we would call back then. And by March of 1984, I started working on Wall Street in that regard.
Wild.
No formal training, other than to learn to take the test.
Yeah.
And was handed a desk, a phone, because that's basically all you had to work with then.
Yeah.
And to really get going, in 3 months I wanted to quit because I couldn't cold call. In fact, if every cold call, every telemarketer was me, no one would ever get a telemarketing call, because the first person that hung up on me, I was done.
Yeah.
So I literally started a newsletter in lieu of having to call, and that was the birth of the Grandich letter, and that led to so-called fame and fortune.
I cut my teeth doing investor relations, as you're probably aware, and I was an awful cold caller, just awful. I relied on relationships with newsletter writers and what have you to keep myself employed, because I was no good doing that. There we are, digress. Tell me what you miss about that side of the water.
To be really candid, nothing. I mean, it's good to see again, but I live about 60 miles south of here, and if I never went into New York City again, I wouldn't feel, unless it was a matter of life or death. It's just something that grew out of. I left it in '81. I came back for a while. My mother lived in the Bronx. I came back when I was very involved in the sports world, because second biggest guy that I was a fan of became a real close friend and a business ally, and he played for the New York Rangers. In fact, he was the original first New Yorker to ever become a New York Ranger, a guy by the name of Nick Fatiu from Staten Island. Yep. And but I look over and it's nice, and it's hopefully still nice to visit, but it isn't the place that I grew up.
Yeah. I got to ask you this, because Wall Street in the 1980s conjures up images of Stratton Oakmont from Wolf of Wall Street and all that. I mean, was it that crazy then, or?
That would get me started on something we can spend 8 hours on.
Yeah.
But as bad as it was then, and those were kind of penny stock over-the-counter houses. Yeah. What the crypto market has come to, it's the penny stock people couldn't hold a candle to it. Yeah. But it was, and it existed, and there used to be a prestige of being a New York Stock Exchange member firm. Yeah. Where you didn't kind of get involved in that low end of the penny stock market. The penny stock market basically has died simply because there's no more commissions in selling stocks. There's no way of marking it up or paying astronomical commissions. But as everything, those movies, I've always said the more closer ramification to what Wall Street was like was the first Wall Street movie. Yeah. The Gordon Geckos of the world, yeah, they existed, and existed a lot through the 80s and 90s. And yeah, to me, that was more realistic.
Yeah, greed is good was the tagline then, right? So, let's touch on the crypto thing for a second, going off script a little bit. Part of what I'm trying to do here is engage with interesting people and have interesting conversations. And one of the ones that I really want to have, and I would love to hear your take on this, and I don't know who it is yet, but I want to sit down with somebody who's played a lot of crypto or is involved in crypto and pick their brain. Because I think that gives, I think from my standpoint, it's always kind of good to sit with the other side and learn what you don't know. Is that either going to continue, or are they training the next group of speculative stock investors? You've been fairly outspoken about it, but I'd love to get 2 minutes of your time thinking what you think about crypto and where you think it kind of goes from here.
I've gotten more criticism, very negative emails to the point of seemingly death threats because of being outspoken about it. I call it Bitcoin, not Bitcoin. I believe Tulip Mania is jealous because of what they've been able to the extent. It's not to say that if we're alive 5, 10, or 15 years from now, some part of it is still around. But from what it's made out to be, better than the invention of the wheel, more important than fire, it's just completely overblown. And what concerns me the most is the outspokenness of certain names in that industry are just really snake oil salesmen of the 21st century.
Running American Pacific, you have to be incredibly careful about what you say and how you say it. Otherwise you get in trouble, quite frankly. I'm amazed with some of the things that have been said, the mortgage your house by Bitcoin. I mean, if I went out and said something along anything remotely like that, I mean, they'd have me in shackles.
Yeah, so that's the first thing that I have at the top of my list. Yeah. There's a gentleman out there, I'll say his name, Michael Saylor, for 2 years was appearing on all the major networks. Sell everything you own, homes, real estate, borrow if you have to, and not even spread it across all different cryptos, just Bitcoin. And I look at these financial so-called commentators, and I did all those shows. I used to be regulars on them. Mm-hmm. And I say, listen, economics 101, investing 101. You don't put everything you have and borrow for it into any one thing, even gold or anything else that we talk about. And here's this openly again and again and again, and no counter. And then why do I know what's happening? Because a few minutes later, that financial network runs an ad for crypto. So that explained everything.
Yeah,
so.
That's a bit like I had this conversation with with Jonas Lang, colleague, and we were talking about sports betting and how that relates to small cap investing. So in the U.S., you can't, as a broker, you can't call anybody for a stock that's under $5. If you want to get involved in a placement, you have to be accredited. There's lots of rules in place. Yet, if you want to drop $10,000 on the Knicks to cover the spread, there's 15 ads every hour on every major network telling you how to do it. I mean, it's...
Well, you went side, and I'll just, so we don't go more side, I'll just say this. Having worked with athletes for over 20 years, the demise of people's monies, as bad as it can be in finances, is now being expanded greatly in sports betting. Yeah. If you talk to anybody from the other sides, the gambler, 1-800-gamblers, people in the medical field and all, especially from the youth, who are literally losing everything. Yeah. Betting sports. And eventually, I can tell you, you're going to read, just as there was scandals on Wall Street, there'll be scandals. It probably will happen more in some Division II college game versus a major league game when everybody
you can
did
see
something.
That coming. Yeah.
But there's too much money around with it, and that's what unfortunately leads to that. That'll be an issue down the road.